Thanks, Emmy. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And then, do we have any public announcements? Oops, we have another number 529-8519 that just came on.
That's Mike Klein.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Yes, Commissioner Vero, I do have an announcement. So
Late breaking news?
Well, not late breaking this time, but certainly breaking for some maybe, and that is that precisely 1 week from today, on September 17th, Missoula County and many other organizations and local governments are hosting what we are calling the Montana Passenger Rail Summit. This is a virtual event and will be an opportunity to hear about passenger rail restoration efforts in southern Montana and how to keep the empire builder strong along the High Line. You can register for this, again, free virtual event by going to www.montanapassengerrailsummit.org.
Emmy, would you be able to put that in our comment section? People will be able to see that.
Yep, will do.
Awesome. Any other public announcements or public comment on items not on this agenda? Okay, our current claims list as of August 27th, 2020 to September 1st, 2020 totals $1,620,900.70. If you want more information, you can check out www.missoulacounty.us for details. We only have one hearing today. It's the Klein family transfer. So Matt Heimel from Community Planning Services, take it away. Thanks.
All right, well, good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Matt Heimel with Missoula County Community Planning Services. So this item today is a family transfer exemption request, and I'll share my screen. I have a quick PowerPoint. So this is a family transfer request from Mr. David M. Klein to use the family transfer exemption to create one parcel to his son, Patrick Dillon Klein. And my screen appears to have frozen. Let me take a brief pause and try to yeah, that's very unfortunate.
Well, Dave, you're muted. Unless... Okay.
Okay, I think it is working again. Sorry about that. It's usually really smooth, but
all good.
This time it was not. Okay, so the subject property for the family transfer is at 16990 Touchette Lane in the Frenchtown area. This is about half a mile north of Interstate 90. Here's a closer aerial image. You can see the existing house in the south part and the road bisecting the parcel. The property is unzoned, and it's located within an area described by the Missoula County Growth Policy from 2016, which dates back to the 1975 Comprehensive Plan. And the growth policy recommends a residential density of 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres for this area. This is the existing configuration for parcel C. The only existing house or dwelling unit is a single family house on the south part of the property, shown as on the bottom part of the screen here. This property was originally created as Parcel C of Certificate of Survey 65 in 1973. And with that exemption, there were a total of 4 parcels over 10 acres created, and that was exempt from subdivision review. At the time, 10-acre parcels could be created through an exemption. So here's the proposed tract layout. The proposed transfer would result in 2 total tracts. The existing 10.98 parent tract would be reduced to 7.29 acres in size in the southeast portion of the property, and that would remain in ownership by the claimant. The northwest portion of the property, across from the road, would be transferred to the claimant's son as Parcel C2 and at 3.69 acres to be used for single-family residential development. So for family transfer requests or any request to have a property project exempt from subdivision review, we review for rebuttable presumptions and general evasion criteria to evaluate if the project represents an evasion of subdivision review. Triggering one or multiple of those criteria does not necessarily mean that it is evading subdivision review, but we look at the case as a whole. So this project did meet a few of those criteria, 2 rebuttable presumptions and 4 evasion criteria. And I'll go through each one and touch on each and describe where we landed on each one. So the first presumption that it met was that there was a transfer of land by a quitclaim deed followed by an attempted use of a subdivision exemption. And so this property has been under the same ownership since 2001, joint ownership of the claimant and his spouse, and a quitclaim deed was filed in this past January. And that was done solely for eligibility to use the family transfer exemption, given nature of the relationship with the claimant's son. And that's something we actually see, it's fairly common, so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's an evasion of subdivision review in this example. The second criteria being that there is no clear intent on the occupancy or use of transfer tracts. So in this project, although the application and surrounding information include clear intent for the claimant's son to own and construct a single-family house on the transfer tract, it's not entirely clear about the intended occupancy, and that's something that we can go over more in the series of questions that will be the next part of this hearing. So for the general evasion criteria, I mentioned there were 4 of those triggered. So the first one being that the original tract, or that the tract was transferred to the claimant in the last 2 years. So again, the claimant owned the property with his spouse since 2001, and it was only recently transferred to be eligible for this exemption. The second criteria is whether or not this tract has had a proposed exemption denied recently. And although not expressly denied by the Board of County Commissioners, a request to utilize a family transfer exemption by the claimant on this parcel was withdrawn during a public hearing this past March. And that withdrawal, which you can see the proposed layout here, was done following discussion during the hearing that cited the proposed number of tracts and the lack of clear intent for all recipients to reside on the tracts. And in this, if we recall, one of the proposed tracts was to be transferred to the claimant's spouse. And following discussion, the application was withdrawn and revised to reflect a reduction from 2 proposed tracts to 1, just for the claimant's son. The third criteria that we look at is whether the family transfer represents a pattern of development. And this one hit that criteria because it does meet this, it has a similar size to other tracts that were created by exemption and also shares road, but it does not necessarily lend itself to being an evasion of subdivision review because it's not a pattern of development with platted tracts, just sharing similarity and road access to other exempt tracts. And the fourth and final evasion criteria that this hit was whether or not the proposed division is incompatible with the growth policy. And for this project, the proposal will exceed the recommended density of 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres. That's recommended by the county growth policy from 2016. So with that, commissioners, I now have some questions for the applicant.
I'm here. This is Mike Klein.
Okay, thanks. I have 5 questions for you. So first, did you buy the property with the intent of dividing it?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you. Second, do you or your transferees intend to transfer the property within the next year?
No, we do not.
Thank you. Have you talked with anyone at the county about going through subdivision review?
No, I haven't.
Thank you. Will the property be developed?
It will be developed with a 3-bedroom, single-family home.
Okay, thanks. And last question, will the recipient of the property be residing on the property?
Yes, he will.
Okay, thank you. So commissioners, based on the facts as presented in this exemption affidavit reviewed by staff and answers to questions, there does not appear to be an attempt to evade subdivision review. So staff recommends approval of this family transfer request, and a recommended motion is available on the presentation and in the packet. And I can take any questions at this time too.
Yeah, Matt, when you said that it doesn't comply with the growth policy, but do you have a graphic or an aerial of the density of the surrounding properties? Because they're all approximately that same size, right?
Right. A few have actually been carved up since then by subsequent exemptions. Here's a better layout.
There you go. Yeah, thanks.
So for instance, Matt, I apologize, where I'm located, I'm getting some excessive glare on my screen. What are some of the comparative sizes of parcels adjoining this particular parent parcel?
They're all a little different in shape due to the nature of the exemptions following desired lot lines. However, you can tell notably to the west and northwest, or the left and upper left from the subject property, it represents similar size and layout sharing roads, not exactly the same acreage, for example, but it does not, like I said, it's not exactly fitting a pattern with platted tracts. These are all exempt tracts that were created with a initial 10-acre exemption and then split subsequently either by family transfer or occasional sale, for example.
And so they look like they're all 3-acre to 5-acre tracts now. Is that fair?
Approximately, yes.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that this proposal is really is in line with the surrounding properties.
Right. It doesn't look like it's out of character.
Thank you. Thank you. Better choice of words. Yeah.
Okay.
So another question that I have, Matt, if hypothetically this were to go through the minor subdivision process, are there any impacts or potential mitigations to impacts that would be picked up on or required of during that process that you could foresee that would not be being addressed during this subdivision exemption process?
There are multiple review criteria that would be picked up and possibly have conditions of approval if this did go through subdivision. One of the main ones that comes to mind is requirements for fire suppression, for example. Creating a lot through exemption doesn't get reviewed for impacts to public health and safety, one of which is requiring a fire suppression system. So perhaps either one example of a condition is that we see often is requirement for residential fire sprinklers. If this is approved, there would be no requirements such as that.
What would be the requirements relative to fire suppression be during the building permit process?
Just for a single family home?
Yes.
What were you asking? Yeah.
So for whatever's being contemplated here, for the home that was mentioned earlier, and even though this would not be front loaded, the fire suppression piece would not be front loaded as it might be with subdivision, would there still be sprinklers or something required by in the building permit process?
To my knowledge, I'm not sure if there would be a requirement for fire sprinklers. I'm not personally familiar with the building code. It would have a full review for building code for a single family residential house. Permits that are within Frenchtown Rural Fire District don't get routed to the fire district for review, unlike Missoula Rural. And so in our end of it, the land use zoning compliance review permit, we would not be reviewing for fire suppression. But like I said, in building code, there could be some more information for example, different wall types. But I myself am not a building code reviewer, so I'm not entirely sure what those specifications would end up being.
Okay.
I don't know. Does Jenna have any more information on that?
I think what Matt said is that it would be reviewed through building permit, and having to comply with building code is exactly what I would have added as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Wonder if is there anyone from the public would like to comment on this? Okay.
Don't see anything.
So I guess I'll just, Matt, could you pull up the motion on the screen, please?
Sure.
Thanks. And I will say this is kind of on the margin of what I would be willing to approve. I'm always a little suspect when we have proposals that are on the margin of not substantially complying with our growth policy, and substantial compliance is really the operative term there. And clearly this is not quite double the density, but approaching that as far as what's recommended in our growth policy for this area. But I think what is somewhat counterbalancing for me is looking at the aerial photo and the adjoining parcels and seeing that this is not completely out of keeping with the land use pattern in this particular area. Had it been, I think we'd be having a different conversation today. So with that said, I would move that the request by David M. Klein to utilize the family transfer exemption, MCA section 76-3-207 subpart 1B, to create and transfer one parcel for his son, Patrick Dillon Klein, as presented in the subdivision exemption affidavit, be approved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
And I will say, I would like to thank the applicant, Mr. Klein, and your representative for hearing what we said in the last session and going back to the drawing board a little bit. I appreciate the flexibility.
Yes, I thank you. My wife was in such bad health, so that's why we kind of changed it around. Our son's going to come and do his best to take care of her while I work out of state. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you,
yeah,
Commissioner.
Thanks, Matt and Jenna, for
Thank you.
reworking this. Is that?
That's probably about as much glare as folks can take off my scalp in this setting, so.
You look great, Dave.
Oh, thanks.
We don't have anything else on the agenda, so is there a motion to adjourn?
I would so move. I think you can just adjourn if you want.
Okay, well then we adjourn. Thanks.